Welcome to episode 27 of the Ikario podcast. In today's episode, I'm actually going to be talking quite a lot. Most of the episode is me chatting about an experience I've had within the past couple of months, and that is the experience of essentially developing an anxiety disorder. So in this episode, I'll talk about what actually happened with me, the difficulties that I faced, the insights I gained, and the recovery methods I used to actually pull myself out of it. And as always, you can go to ikario.com/027 for the links in the show notes. And if you want to leave a voice note response, go to anchor.fm/ikario. In addition to this, we also include one of your comments. So recently, YouTube for some reason has been deleting comments. And we're not entirely sure why that is, but what we did is we screenshotted a few comments and we responded to them anonymously in the episode. So we're going to do that in a few episodes going forward. So yeah, if you leave a comment and it disappears, we will get around to it at some point soon. So without further ado, I give you episode 27. Hello and welcome to the Ikario podcast, where we help you break free from the human zoo, optimize your life and become a force to be reckoned with. We're here again. Hello. It's nice to see you again. With your hosts, Ollie
and Shane.
So before we dive into the main topic of the episode, we're actually going to address a rather unusual thing that's been happening on the channel, where comments just get deleted by YouTube, it seems. So what we've done is we've taken some comments, because we get them emailed to us, so we can save them. And to address this, we thought we would read them out. Just so the guys that have taken such a long time to actually comment, we can address those.
Yeah, so this is the first of these we're unearthing these comments. This is one of those comments that just disappeared for unknown reasons. This was on episode 22, which was about the 4 types of goals. So in that episode, we talked about this framework for thinking about goals, about having, being, becoming, and doing goals, and like different levels of goals. And so Claire left a comment here. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll put the full comment on the screen here, and I will just paraphrase this. So she's kind of sharing some of her experience with this, and I think there's also kind of a question or something in here that I think we can respond to. Because one of the things she says is that she's basically describing, okay, in my situation, a having goal is really important. Okay, so in a situation where the goal of the example she gives here is like the goal of having more money and having like enough money to fulfill my basic needs and to take care of my family is really important to me. And this is a comment that I think is worth addressing, because in this episode we did essentially rank the goals, right? Where we're basically saying like the having goal, when your goal is about I want to have something that I don't have now, is in many ways a less powerful goal, let's say, than a goal that is about who do I want to become, or who do I want to be, or what do I want to do, right? The process-oriented goal, that would be our highest ranked goal.
Yeah.
And we give various reasons why we think that ultimately a doing goal is better than a having goal. And here, let me read out some of the last part here. Acting is the best way to become who you want to be. Where to put the goals in this reaction chain? Well, whatever feels fine for you to stay motivated. And I think this is an important point. Like, besides everything we said about, the reasons for why one type of goal is better than another, that doesn't mean that like the ideal state is everybody should only have doing goals all the time. Because realistically, it's a bit like the hierarchy of needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like, obviously we'd like to be at the top of the pyramid where we aren't worried about our immediate survival, and we can worry about, purpose and fulfillment and, leaving a legacy, all this that's great. But the truth is, you can be in a state, you can be in a place in your life where the more basic needs are the ones that you're focused on, and those are the ones you need to meet. And I think this also applies to these levels of goals. It is sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes the thing that drives you is, damn it, I need more of this thing, or I want this thing. And I think money is a good example of that, because, hey, if you don't have enough money, then it's very hard to focus on anything that isn't how broke you are and how much you need more money. It's one of these things that is really dominating of our attention. And we talked about this in the How to Get Your Shit Together series as well. That's one of the reasons we talked about money there, because, like when you're, like with your health, if you're sick, you can't focus on anything else.
No.
You're just in pain and you're sick and you just need to get better. And you can't really worry about, what's my legacy and how do I, whatever. It's no, I'm just in pain and I want to not be in pain anymore. And so money is also one of those things. Like if you're in really dire straits financially, it's really hard to care about anything other than how do I get more money. And so that is perfectly fine. Like if one of the lower level goals, if a having goal or a being goal is what motivates you, if that's what you need in the moment, then there's nothing wrong with that. I think the takeaway shouldn't be that it's wrong to have a having goal. The takeaway should be that it's probably not good for you if you stay stuck there.
Yeah.
So if you're in this situation where it's okay, I'm broke, I need to get more money to take care of myself, and then you do get more money, and you have enough money to take care of everything you need, and then you make even more money, and you have enough money to save and invest and whatever, and you're still the only thing you can think about is how do I get more money? How do I get more money? Then it becomes essentially pathological. You become one of these hungry ghosts, right? We've talked about that before. This idea of a hungry ghost where you're trying to feed something inside yourself. I need more money. I need more money. I need more money. Or the same with, validation. I need more validation, more validation, more validation. And you become a hungry ghost because you can't level up your self-perception and the way you think about goals. You stay stuck in a really miserable place.
Yeah.
And that's like the takeaway is like, don't get stuck on a lower level goal. It's not about avoid the lower level goals at all costs.
So, yeah, it's a good point. I've heard this kind of thing talked about. There's a book called Transcend: The New Science of Self-Actualization by a guy called, I think it's Barry John Kaufman, I think his name is. I'll put it in the show notes. But in this he talks about the security goals versus growth goals. He simplifies it in that way. Mm. And the humanists actually think like if the person has real deficits in their security, then the human being will find it extremely difficult to strive for a growth goal.
Yeah.
Because if they just have lack, it's as you described, if you just got a lot of things that they threaten your survival, then your consciousness, your mind is going to be solely focused on the attainment of those things. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm passionate about finding ways to empower people, or rather finding ways to help people empower themselves, because I think it is when you have the power to lift yourself out of these safety goals, out of these lower level needs and concerns, that is when the opportunity arises for you to be like creative and for you to think about what's my purpose and for you to think about how do I live ethically and so on. That's one of the reasons I think this is so important, right? The more people are lifted out of the lower level of, oh my God, how do I survive? How do I not go broke? The more human potential is basically unleashed.
Yeah.
All right. So the comment from Claire, thank you very much for that. And yeah, we don't know why the YouTube algorithm didn't want this comment. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's not in any way dodgy as well. So why would they censor that?
Yeah. So, but there you go. That's and we're going to do that on some future episodes. Basically, as long as this keeps happening, if you leave a comment with an interesting question or story and the YouTube algorithm somehow eats it up for some reason, we will always take some of these comments and just bring them onto the show.
Yeah. Alternatively, you can always leave a voice note reply, and then nothing is deleting that. So yeah, it's also an option. All right. So, and to leave a voice note, you can go to the show notes. Now, with that said, let's get into the main topic for the day. And I guess this is pretty personal. Oh yeah. For you, because you have been going through a personal struggle here, and you've learned some things along the way that we're going to try and deconstruct here. So can you tell us the story first of what you went through? Yeah, and I want to just clarify that for sure, currently going through, just in a lesser intensity. Certainly to a degree where I can actually talk about it now and make a bit of sense of it. So it was about 6 weeks ago, I started getting panic attacks. And I'd had anxiety in the past, And occasionally I have brief periods of sort of depression, of like an existential sort of
Yeah.
leaning. But usually that would leave quite quickly, and I'm back to sort of going to the gym and all the other stuff. This time, it was something else. It was more persistent and it was far more intense than I've ever experienced before. And it all just seemingly came out of the blue. It was anxiety, like a generalized sense of dread that permeated practically every day. I'd wake up and for some reason I'd just feel like something bad was going to happen all the time. And then occasionally panic would envelop me to the point where I couldn't really do anything else other than just lie there and just think I was losing my mind. And I was at a loss for why this was happening. So I reached out and I got help, like an online therapist. And we talked about what could have led to it. Because the first panic attack I had was when I actually decided to sort of really slow down. And I went away with my girlfriend to like a shepherd's hut in the Algarve. And I noticed I was getting panic attacks come up when I slowed down, which was quite weird. But anyway, we worked out that around this period, me and the other ikario guys, we'd moved apartments like 3 times. So that was one stressor. I had recently recovered from COVID, and my grandfather had recently passed away from COVID, and I couldn't attend the funeral. That was a real stressor. And a number of other stressors too. But it just seemingly all just came through the door at once and led to this panic and anxiety. And it persisted for a good solid few weeks. And I know some people can get anxiety and it lasts like years and whatever, but the frequency of the panic, it was like a year's worth of anxiety condensed into 3 weeks, where every day was just almost in a consistent panic state. I don't know how I managed to get work done, to be honest. And around that time, I also started to experience a really disturbing symptom, which was what I later come to realize was derealization. And this derealization, I mean, to people who are not aware of this as a symptom of anxiety, which is what it essentially is, it would seem like a person's having a psychotic breakdown. And that's the conclusion I came to, because I've uncovered a fear within me, which is like a fear of losing my mind. And I've since confronted that and made sense of it and like, no, I'm probably not. But at the time, the only conclusion I could come to was that I was having a complete psychotic breakdown. And as well as a bunch of other things my mind, like conclusions my mind came to. But derealization was where, derealization or depersonalization, if you go online and type that in, you'll often find DP/DR. Because depersonalization and derealization, they seem to just commingle. The felt sense of it is, it feels like you're looking at reality from a distance. And it's not that far away, but it's enough. It's like you're looking at reality through 6-inch glass. And that's derealization, where nothing seems real. And it's very disturbing because you've never had this experience before in your life. It's like all of a sudden nothing seems real. And then it can cause your mind to then go off into existential territory. It's like, what's happened to me kind of thing? Have I lost my mind? Will I ever feel normal again? And all this other stuff. And depersonalization comes with it, where you actually start to look at yourself and you start to feel like you're not real. Where you think, like when you're talking to someone, I had this very bizarre sensation where I'd experienced anxiety and panic, and I was speaking to Dean in the kitchen. And as I was talking, I observed a very peculiar thing. I was like, I don't know how these words are coming out. It doesn't feel like me speaking. And it doesn't feel like, and then I look at my hands and I'm like, I don't feel like they're mine. And I didn't think this was depersonalization, derealization at the time. I just thought, I'm losing my mind here. I'm completely losing the plot.
So before we go on, a few things I want to pull out here that I think are worth digging into a little bit is, the first is that, okay, you're experiencing anxiety and depression and panic attacks and things. And I think it's very important, like you said, a bunch of difficult things had happened in your life recently. And this is the first time I was given this idea, I guess, is from the book Lost Connections by Johan Hari, where he talks about depression. And he talks about how, like, look, sometimes maybe depression is just like a chemical imbalance in your brain or something. But sometimes you're depressed because things are going horribly, And this is also what I would put into the concept of the human zoo. You find yourself in an environment that is just inhumane. And you're forced to get up early when you haven't had enough sleep and go on a commute, crowded with people, and work at a job that you hate for not enough money, and all this kind of, you're socially isolated, and things are just not good. And it's like, sometimes the answer is, hey, look around. This is why you're depressed. You're depressed because things are terrible, right? And it's almost like cry for help. It's like something has got to change. You can't just keep doing this.
Yeah.
And then the solution is not to take some pill to try and numb the pain, right? And I think that's one of the important things to acknowledge. Like, sometimes we go through difficulties and we think, I ought to not have this. I ought to be hyperproductive and performing and doing everything right and having a smile on my face. It's like, no, there's a good reason why you feel like this. That's an important thing to acknowledge. And that can be difficult to acknowledge, especially when you're in it and you're in the mode of just blaming yourself for everything.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to highlight here is that, and this may be kind of a masculine trait. I think, although I'm sure there's women who do this too, but I know more men who are like this, where we tend to bear the burden of something far too long. And it takes something extreme for us to go, okay, maybe I need help. And that's like, because as long as you're experiencing, like, let's say, normal levels of anxiety and depression, you're just like, just don't be a pussy, just grit your teeth and get through it. Yeah. Then you experience something like panic attacks and depersonalization and stuff. It's like, no, this is a real problem. Get help, right? And that's another thing I just want to point out. I think this is another indicator. I've had this problem too, right? I've had this problem with depression where I think I'm getting better at it, but it used to be that it's only when I'm really, really severely depressed that I stop and think, oh, maybe I'm depressed, And up until that point, I'm just like, get it together,
Yeah.
in a way, right? So, and that's another thing I just want to highlight, because I'm sure that a lot of people are dealing with some form of this. And right now is a chance for you to ask yourself this, is like, okay, am I experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression? Are there reasons for this out in the world where I can say, look, this is why it's happening. It's not just me being weak or something. And also, can I acknowledge this now, or do I have to wait for something really bad to happen before I get around to acknowledging it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question to ask. And it totally tracks with what I was going through. Because prior to this experience, I was drinking shitloads of coffee, and I was not doing meditation that much. I was not really doing introspective writing. I was distracting myself with Reddit and YouTube quite a lot. And it's kind of interesting how around the time when I decided to stop doing this is when all of it sort of came to the...
You opened the floodgates.
Exactly. It's like I was a few steps ahead of the storm, and then when I decided to say, oh, I'm going to turn around and face it, and as soon as I did, it was like, boom, it completely took me under. Yeah. Meanwhile, the storm was behind me the whole time. I was just successfully outrunning it up until that point, and then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. That's what happened. I mean, the trigger was a series of really challenging life events that kind of, it meant that I could, like, the price of the comfort of trying to outrun them, it's like it wasn't worth it anymore because the pain was still there. So I was like, okay, the only way to really overcome this is to turn around and face it. I mean, right now, I'm considerably better than I was only a few weeks ago. So there's some things that I did that helped me overcome this problem.
Let's go into like what the steps, or let's say your journey of getting out of this, or getting at least to where you are now. One thing that maybe is also worth mentioning, I think we talked about this before, right? Your therapist was basically saying, oh, right now, a lot of my clients have recovered from COVID and have anxiety.
Yes, actually, yeah, it's good that you mentioned that. Because, yeah, I was talking to my therapist is a specialist in anxiety disorders. That's kind of why I reached out to her. And she was mentioning that, cause, like, I was quite surprised because, like, the first conversation I had with her, she was immediately asking me about loads of COVID questions. And I've always been a bit of a deep thinker, and I've been interested in Zen and mysticism and stuff. So usually my mind goes to, if there's any dodgy thing in my reality, my mind sort of goes to the metaphysical first,
Right.
and it can sort of become a bit untethered. But she was saying, okay, have you been exposed to COVID recently? Have you had COVID? Have you had anyone who has COVID? And I was like, yes. She's like, okay. She goes, I'm not going to tell you that the cause of this anxiety is COVID because we don't know, but I'm just going to say that I'm an anxiety specialist, and about 8 out of 10 of my current clients at the moment, they have anxiety. They didn't have anxiety before. They all had COVID. Like 8 out of 10 of them had COVID within the past 3 months, and here they are. And she says, I'm not saying that's the reason, but I'm also suggesting that it's a contributor if we go by that.
And we've clearly seen that, like, COVID does freaky things to people, right? That's because, some people just brush it off, seemingly nothing happens. Some people die, and some people have like long-lasting complications. It's clearly, we don't fully understand this thing. And so it's not impossible to imagine that there's a connection there that we don't fully understand yet. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to make this episode, because I think even whether it's directly related to COVID or not, to the virus itself, clearly a lot of people are struggling with anxiety and depression because we've been stuck in a pandemic for more than a year now. So, I think that for sure what you went through, what you've experienced, I'm pretty sure there's lots and lots of people who have the same problems. And so, let's get into, like, what did you do and how did you start? Like, how did you start, recovering, let's say?
Yeah, so it's kind of mad to think about it now. So while it was going on, I was really clutching for an answer to the problem. It's like I was trying to solve an emotional problem with my mind, like trying to solve it like a Rubik's Cube, like a puzzle. Like if I find the answer on a cognitive level, then I can not feel this way anymore. And that there was like 2 weeks of me trying to do that until eventually it led to a complete breakdown. And I can only describe that because it wasn't a panic attack. That was a complete crack up. I was in the fetal position on the floor crying, talking to one of my best friends on the phone saying, I do not know what's happening to me. I haven't got a clue. She was like, that's okay. You don't know. I'm like, no, but I can't not know what's going to happen. She was like, just, you don't know. That's fine. You don't need to know, which was a kind of a foreign concept to me at the time. I was like, I don't need to know. What the fuck? So it was after that the recovery actually began. Because before that, I was resisting this anxiety like hell.
You were like trying to control it
Definitely.
cognitively.
I was like, if I just need to put it in place and fix it and act normal. And if I don't look at it and if I don't acknowledge its existence, it will go away. And then it just got louder and louder and louder until eventually it just became clear that my mind was not going to solve this problem. It's not in the moment, at least. So then I had a crack up. And then after that, I was completely done. I was just humbled. And then I went to my girlfriend's and stayed with her for a couple of weeks because that seemed to be the only thing that, it was like my only option at that point because I couldn't even think clearly. And I learned that you're not thinking clearly when you're anxious or depressed or in a panic state because the rational part of your brain has basically fucked off for a while. So you're making extreme black and white catastrophic conclusions about what's going on that keep the anxiety going. So it's just I didn't know what was going on with me. So I just went and stayed with her for a couple of weeks. And that's when the anxiety started to, initially after the first few days of staying with her, the anxiety was there. The depression kind of kicked in at that point and the hopeless thoughts and stuff. So the things that really helped me, I've made a list of them, but I'm just going to reel them off by heart. Hopefully in chronological order. So I noticed that blood sugar made a huge difference.
That's unexpected.
And because I'm trying to be as holistic as possible. because I'm naturally quite like I tilt towards Buddhism and stuff, but I want to also be really holistic about this. It's like, why suffer if you just need to eat now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was walking through the park and I was having the most depressing thoughts. I was having like, this is hopeless. Life is too chaotic. I'm not enough. I'm not going to be able to handle this. The best thing I can do right now is just move back in with my father and just be like a child again, and then until I eventually just die. And that's what my mind was doing. And I believed what my mind was thinking. So you can only imagine the kind of suffering I was going through. And then I went to the shop and I recognised, hang on, I've not eaten in 2 days. So I went to the shop and just bought a shitload of mandarins and loads of nuts. And I just went to my girlfriend's and I just sat down on the sofa and I was just talking to her and I just felt like, I just felt utterly hopeless. I just sat there like, I feel awful. So I was like, the best thing I can do is I'm just going to eat these mandarins and all these nuts. And then within 30 minutes, I was like, so do you fancy taking the dog for a walk? And she was like, are you feeling okay? I was like, yeah, I actually am. I'm feeling a lot better. That's strange. She was like, well, you haven't eaten in 2 days, so it's kind of not that strange. I was like, okay, cool. So eating helped, like surprisingly.
Did you find that certain foods, different reactions, different foods or not?
Yeah, so I tried to eat a couple of days before that, but it was just this Chinese that me and my girlfriend ordered. And I felt repulsed by it. I was like, it's like deep fried stuff. So I was like, ugh, I don't want that. My body was just sort of like, ugh, just tightened up in response to it. But it was just nuts and fruit seemed to just be the thing that I could graze on for a couple of days after that. And it was really quite noticeable. If I'd not eaten for a few hours, I'd be like, okay, all these haunting thoughts came back. And it's quite fascinating how those thoughts are actually a symptom of it. It's like the thought, you can follow them, you can believe them if you want, but they are just a symptom of the way you feel. Like the thoughts would come back and then that'd be an indication, hang on, have I eaten for a while? No. So I'll eat and then the thoughts go, okay, see you later. It's like, you definitely will. You're not gone. I know you're not, but yeah, see you in a bit. So yeah, it was just healthy stuff. Managing your blood sugar. And usually I notice things with quite a lot of fiber, like mandarins and stuff, seem to be pretty good. I ain't got a clue what that means about, because they talk about the gut-brain connection a lot now, don't they? And fiber is really good in that sense, like digestively.
Yeah, it seems like that's a very lived example of this. Yeah.
Yeah. There was, I mean, the way I think about it now, the things that helped me, they were almost, in terms of their background, it was like spiritually, right? So I started to read a little bit of books by Pema Chodron. So Pema Chodron's a Buddhist teacher who addresses suffering directly. And there was a book called When Things Fall Apart. And I read quite a bit of that, which helped me kind of accept the suffering in the moment as it was here. And I also saw it from a physiological perspective, which is like eating and sleeping better, or prioritizing sleep to the degree that I could. And I'm not saying that I could sleep really well at that point, but staying up on Reddit until 2 o'clock in the morning certainly wasn't helping. So prioritizing sleep, eating well, and sort of feeding my mind with the right stuff in terms of like the spiritual stuff, like reading like Buddhism and whatnot. And yeah, there was some other things that helped me. I kind of recognized that when I was really resisting the suffering, I almost had this idea that someone could come and just fix it. And I don't know why that idea came up. I thought, okay, maybe if this is that bad, I can just go to a doctor and they'll give me a pill. Or I could just go to some specialist and they say, okay, this is why you're experiencing this. Do these steps, you're done, fixed. And I remember just being in the shower and just being like, that's bullshit, isn't it? That's bullshit. That's not happening.
It's like an escapist fantasy.
Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah. It was like really, there's no one coming to save me here. Because there's no unique, like, because I'm quite unique in all this. Like, everyone's anxiety is difficult and it's challenging, but it's kind of unique in its own configuration because you're an individual and stuff. So I had to just accept that no one's coming to save me. And that was, initially there was a hopelessness that followed, but then just, well, okay, well, what do we do? What do I have control over and what don't I? You know?
So that's almost like, I guess one way to think of that would be like you surrender to the problem you're having.
Yes.
Instead of, because in a way, if you think that, oh, maybe, yeah, I'll just take a pill or whatever, you're still in a way in denial of the problem. you're telling yourself, oh, there's an easy solution, I just haven't done it yet for some reason, right? And acknowledging, no, this is real, this is happening right now. It's like you're surrendering to how bad it is.
Yeah.
And yes, it's very unpleasant, but it's then the first step that makes you go, okay, well, if it's really all up to me, what can I do then?
Exactly. Yeah. And pretty soon after that, I also accepted that this could easily be just a long-term problem. And for some reason that provided some relief because I was, as I say, I was resisting it, and I was thinking I just needed to fix it in the moment and then I'll be fine in an hour. And that clearly wasn't happening.
It puts a lot of pressure on you because you always feel like I should have fixed it by now.
Yeah, 100%. Should have fixed it by now, and if I just get this thing right or go to the right person or whatever, they'll just come and fix it for me. And it's just like, no one's coming to save me, and this is probably a long-term problem. Because I've experienced anxiety throughout my life. First panic attack I had was in the head teacher's office when I was like 6. She was like screaming at me. She was pretty nuts. She was screaming at me, and I remember almost passing out. I didn't know it was a panic attack at the time, but it was. So those two realizations: eating helped, sleeping. My girlfriend helped, and this is not something that you can just be like, that's something within you. But I'd also be remiss to say that wasn't a big part of it.
Yeah.
For some reason, I needed just some unconditional support, which she gave just consistently, even though she had her own shit going on at the time. And it's just like, man, that really helped. And it reminded me that sometimes, and this is kind of a realization I had, sometimes no matter how much of a badass you are, sometimes you will get hit with a problem that far exceeds your capacity to handle on your own.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the thing I recognized. I was just like, if I was alone in a flat and dealing with this, I don't know where I'd go to in my mind,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's also something where if you really want to be the most badass you can be, then you do need that recovery and nurture. Because it's just like with training, right? If you want to train super hard, you have to rest super hard in a way, right? It's like you have to really prioritize rest. And of course you can grunt it out on your own and be a badass, be like the lone wolf badass. But if you want to be your best, I think you do need to go through these cycles, right? You need to have the whatever, you're testing your strength, doing the hard thing, and then recovery and nurture and so on.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that we need other people.
Yeah.
That's the realization I came to as well. It was like, we do need other people, and it's not a weakness.
Yeah.
To need other people. And there was something that helped me, and this is actually a resource for anyone who's experiencing anxiety. This thing that really helped. There's actually 2 resources that I'm going to put in the show notes. One of them is called, it's just an app called Dare, and it's written by a guy called, this Irish guy called Barry. There's a lot of Barrys I'm talking about. 2 Barrys so far. Yeah, this Irish fella who went through panic and anxiety himself for many years and overcame it. And it's basically called DARE, as in the DARE response, DARE. D is diffuse, as in like if you get negative thoughts, you just sort of brush them off. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. A is accept and allow. You accept and allow literally all of it, like all the sensations, no matter how bizarre or scary. Anxiety stays around in the resistance to all of it. Whereas if they're just sensations, they'll come and go. But your resistance is the thing that keeps them alive for longer. So if you accept and allow, that kind of helps. R is run towards. So if you're finding that you can't overcome this, if you can't overcome the panic, if the panic is there, if it's there, then you can run towards it by basically demanding that it gets worse. That's kind of a fascinating thing, because there was one time I was having a full-blown panic attack, and I felt like a nutcase. I would just lay there going, "Come on!" Yeah. I was just saying, "Come on, get worse." If you're gonna drive me insane and cause a psychotic breakdown, do it now. Go on, send me insane. Do it, break me. It didn't, and it kind of just buggered off for a while, which is kind of cool. And yeah, E would be engage. So you engage with something else, as in you engage in a task that could possibly bring you into the flow state so that you're not so inwardly focused on your anxiety and anticipating things fearfully.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. I mean, I don't know why I don't know why existing as a human being is like this, but it's certainly that seems to be one of the rules, right? What you resist persists, and for some reason facing things head on and accepting the discomfort and so on is like, that's what's more likely to make the discomfort go away, except if you're telling yourself, okay, I'm going to accept this so that it goes away, then it doesn't work. It's like, why is that? It's such a strange mechanism. And maybe we can find someone who can explain to us why this is, but that just seems to be how it works. And I've experienced this as well, especially like the run towards it, right? That kind of attitude of turning towards something and being like, okay, not only am I accepting this, just hit me with your best shot, basically. That is something that I also think has served me really well. But why the hell is that? I don't know.
I've got no idea, mate. It takes courage, though. It really does take courage.
Yeah, it can be very, very difficult to not want to escape the discomfort. And I've had this, I've seen this on both sides. So I think that, over time I've gotten better and better at accepting difficulties and accepting the discomfort and just being like, okay, let's feel this bad feeling. But I've also experienced like the limits of that, where there can be something that is so uncomfortable and so difficult that even though intellectually I'm like, well, what I want to be doing is I want to accept this, but I can't, So it's also not just it's sometimes easier said than done, basically.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's not a panacea.
Yeah.
And it might just be the case that you just have to experience some shittiness for a while.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, it's like accepting it and allowing it with these emotional issues is your best shot, but it's not a guarantee. As in, it's not a guarantee that it's going to make it go away. It's just going to lessen the chance of any additional suffering you might create from the resistance won't be there.
Yeah.
But this doesn't mean that the experience is still going to be fine, because you might be in for a rough ride for a while.
Yeah. I also, one thing here, I feel like sometimes there's almost like a fixed amount of suffering that you're going to experience. And the question is, are you going to experience like slowly as a poison drip of small doses of suffering like for years? Or are you going to like rip the whole line of suffering in one go, and just have like the worst day of your life?
Yeah.
But then you kind of get it out of your system,
Yeah.
But it's the same amount of suffering,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Actually, Pema Chodron said that in one of her talks on YouTube. It's just a quote that kind of stayed with me in a way. Fear, if it's not heightened, it usually exists in the background instead.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have this heightened level of fear and you have to face it and you have to process it, it usually just drapes in the background and does its work that way.
Yeah.
So maybe it is the right thing. It's the better thing to endure a couple of months of just intense panic and anxiety or whatever, and just face it fully, and whatever changes that creates in your life. Maybe that's the best shot, rather than just living an entire life terrified in the background but never actually facing it because you're always running from it.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a better solution.
Yeah. But it can also be really hard. And yeah, I've definitely felt that it's almost like, you can choose a chronic suffering or acute suffering, right? And it's a hard choice to make, basically, because what we'd like is like, how come one of the options isn't no suffering? Where's the no suffering choice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like pick your poison,
Yeah. So you said 2 resources, I think, right? So Dare is one of them.
The Dare app, and it's also an audiobook. If you're experiencing anxiety and have done for a while, you want to overcome this, it's such a great book to read, listen to, because he also has this kind of angelic Irish voice that's just so reassuring as well. Like, everything's going to be all right. And it's like, I exaggerated a bit. It's not a leprechaun, but the audiobook as well is great resource. Also the other one, which is it's simply the best resource I've found online for all things anxiety, which is anxietycenter.com. And it addresses literally every symptom that's ever been associated with anxiety. Because one thing that can happen when you have this, when you experience anxiety, is you think that in some way you're special and that your anxiety is not like anyone else's, and thus you are beyond help. And when you think that, you then seem to find loads of evidence for it. Oh, no one feels that fuzziness at this part of my cranium. Therefore, my anxiety is different. Yeah. And then it addresses that too. It's like, okay, random fuzziness in the head. There you go. Okay, yeah. Anything else? But it's a great resource. It also has, it's kind of a course, but it's like $7. It's crazy how much value is in this thing. You go on, it's like recovery. It's just called recovery support. You go to that website, you click that, you sign up, you pay your $7 for 30 days. And meanwhile, it just has like 21 different modules of all things anxiety related to stress, sleep, nutrition, exercise, like all things, and cognitive stuff like rewiring your thought processes and stuff. It's extremely practical. So anxietycenter.com and Dare, the audiobook in the app, both two things that really, really helped me. So those are some practical things you can go and have a look at. Because one of the things that helped me was learning what is actually happening to my body, what's going on here. And that really does help, that really does help. That might be a form of resistance, but it helps to understand what's actually going on so that when you have an anxiety or panic attack or whatever, you can reassure yourself that this is a temporary experience. You're not losing your mind. You're not going to die. No matter what symptoms come up, if it's anxiety and a panic attack, it will pass. And it's just simply your sympathetic nervous system going haywire and perceiving a threat that's not there. And it's reacting as if, if there's a real threat in the room. Yeah.
And so these are there other things on your list of like things you did to help recover?
So I think I've covered most of them. Another one was recognizing my triggers, which is pretty damn simple, but I told myself, I don't know why this is happening. And that was because I was grasping for certainty, and in a kind of screwed up way, saying I don't know why this is happening is another way of kind of finding some certainty. I don't know, but that's kind of like a very certain thing to say. So that's kind of like subtle. But until my therapist started saying, okay, well, this is not happening for absolutely no reason. So keep your eyes open and pay attention. When are you most anxious? And I was like, okay, I'm most anxious when I'm trying to work. Like, why? Okay, there's some underlying beliefs there that I've been addressing. It's like, okay, so becoming aware of your triggers is a pretty proactive thing you can do. You can just keep a little journal with you, and you can write down the sort of automatic negative thoughts you get during the day. If you get a thought come up, you can just write that down. Or if you notice a situation that comes up that reliably brings a kind of anxiety, you can write that down. And it just helps you map the unknown territory, because anxiety can throw you into a territory where you feel like you don't know which way's up. But this is just another way of mapping it and sort of working out what's going on. Another thing was reading recovery stories. If you go on Reddit, the subreddit anxiety, this won't help you unless it's a recovery story, right? Because there are people who go on there and they're desperate. Yeah. So you can go on Reddit, subreddit anxiety, and just read horror story after horror story after horror story. Some people saying I've had anxiety for 10 years. It's never got better, even for a moment. It's like, how can that be true, man? Because they're desperate, they want help, but they're suffering. Yeah. And that, I don't think that will help you. So reading anxiety recovery stories can help, because you believe without them, you think that I'm going to be stuck in this thing for 10 years or forever or whatever. And you read people who've actually overcome this problem, and it gives you a sense of hope. Yeah. And I think the last thing is, it's just patience, and it's just the healing power of time. If you're doing a decent morning routine, if you're managing your stress levels as much as you can, if you're looking at your thought processes, if you're recognizing your triggers, you're eating well, you're doing all the healthy stuff, it's just a matter of time. And setbacks will occur. Because there were times when, even during the worst times, I'd have a day where I felt okay. And then I'd be like, oh my God, I've sorted this out. I'm fixed. And then the following day, it's like, boom, panic attack. Yeah. And then it'd send me down the hole again. But you will have setbacks, and that's just a normal part of recovery. So just being patient. Just keep doing the things, keep doing the routine, the healthy stuff. Watch your stress levels. Don't identify with the negative thoughts too much. Just let them sort of come and go, and just trust that over time you will feel better.
Yeah.
You will.
Yeah. And another thing that I think is worth mentioning here is because, okay, we often talk about things like basically how to be a high performer, how to be productive, how to not procrastinate, this kind of stuff, right? And obviously those things are all important in the project of like being your best self and living a great life. Obviously, it's you're much better off if you can be highly productive and so on. But an important principle here is the idea that the obstacle to your task is your task. And if you stay in that mode, and this is also, something that I've suffered from, where if you're going through something like anxiety and depression, but you stay in that mode where you're like, I have to perform, I have to be super productive, I have to do all this highly focused work, I have to, that it's like, then you're too busy. It's like you're too busy to work on the problem. You're too busy to be like, hey, maybe I need a break. Maybe I need to schedule some time for therapy. Maybe I need to schedule some time to go through one of these courses that you mentioned. It's like all of this stuff takes time, and you're going to not do something else. And you can be stuck in this mode of thinking, well, I'm too busy for that. I don't have enough time to deal with this, because it's like, and it's also a form of denial, I think, right? But look, the reality is, if you don't deal with it, it's going to keep getting worse probably until it's crippling.
Yeah.
And then you feel like, well, I can't do it because I'm feeling too bad or whatever. It's like, no, at some point you have to say, okay, I have this problem. And if it's important to me to be a high-performing individual, then I have to prioritize working on this problem. And as long as I'm constantly telling myself, well, tomorrow I need to get back on the horse and have a fully productive workday and so on, you're just refusing to work on the real task, which is work on this problem, right? Work on this problem. And sometimes, yes, maybe it will mean that in the rest of your life, and that could be work-related, that could be your, even your family obligations or your social obligations or whatever, you might have to step back from that and be like, I'm sorry, but you guys are just going to have to do without me for a while, or I'm just not going to be able to perform my usual role for a few weeks because I have to prioritize getting over this so that I can get to the other side of it where I'm not just like coping and hanging on by a thread, but where I can actually be fully myself again.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I'm so empathic for people who have this experience and they have real responsibilities and people who depend on them.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a family of my own, like kids and stuff. And you're not too bad of a boss, Shane. You're not cracking the whip all the time. So it's like the people who go through this, man, and they've just got so many people who depend on them. And they got a job to do and everything. And then, well, bam, anxiety comes. It's like, Jesus Christ. It's like I'm super empathic, but it's still, even though that's the case, it's like, yeah, what do? You have to address it.
Yeah.
In some way.
And this is where we need a support network. And this is also where, again, this is a human zoo topic to me. It's like, look, people are not cogs in a machine. You cannot expect, and so for me, I see this from the perspective of an employer. It's like, yeah, of course it would be great. It would be great for your business projections if every person was just like a consistent high performer, never a pause, right? And you can just like be like, okay, if this person is inserted here, this is going to be their output forevermore. That's not how people work. It's just not how people work. People go through ups and downs. People have good days and bad days. They're going to be super motivated to do one thing this week, and then they're going to struggle next week and so on. And it's like, look, and I feel like a lot of, the way we often deal with this is basically denial, right? It's like you have to just grit your teeth and pretend like everything's fine. And I'm going to be mad at you when you don't perform like last week and stuff. It's like you're just in denial of human nature here. This is not helping. And this is one of the things, like, okay, again, like I said, this is a human zoo thing. The problem is most of us are pretty deep in the human zoo. And yeah, we don't have a boss who will say, okay, fine, I'll try to support you or something, and we don't have, like you said, it can be very, very tough if you already have 99 other problems to deal with and then anxiety comes along. is super tough. But I
Yeah.
think and this is also the value of building a support network and, building a tribe of people who have these kinds of values and with whom you have, mutual support and honest communication and so on. In the good times, build this tribe because you'll need them in the bad times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. 100%. Yeah. And that's a big part of it is being able to talk about it, because the pressure to be like a consistent sort of high performer, and if you've got loads of responsibilities to keep everything together, then anxiety comes. The issue with anxiety too is that the problem I face with it, which brought a lot of guilt and shame with it too, is that on the external, I looked around and things seemed fine. It's like I can list a shitload of reasons why my life's great.
Right, yeah.
And then yet here I feel, and then the other part kicks in to say, well, why should you? No one else feels this way. Why should you feel this way? Everything's fine. There are people who have it way worse than you do.
Yeah.
And it's like, Jesus Christ. Well, that voice isn't helping either. Until you reach out and just, you be honest about this, and you'll learn that people they're not keeping it together perfectly all the time either.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And I think, in conclusion, I think that there's like two larger takeaways here, right? As we mentioned earlier, it seems like there might be a connection with COVID, and there's certainly a connection with being stuck in lockdown and pandemic and whatnot, where right now a lot of people are suffering from anxiety, from panic attacks, from depression, and go to the show notes. Basically, there we put in all the recommended books, the resources, and so on. Like, find what works for you, because that's another thing. Look, maybe you read one of those books and it does nothing for you, but you try the app and it's great, or something like that, right? But try it out. Experiment with solutions that work for you. But also, if you're currently not suffering from these problems, keep an eye out for people in your circle who are, and many of them are maybe not letting on, but keep an eye out and be the support. That's another thing you can do, right? It's like, this is an opportunity for you. If you are doing well, you can be that supportive friend. You can be someone who makes a huge difference to someone else who is struggling with this.
There we go. Sounds
right.
good. I mean, last thing I wanted to say is that, yeah, it's open-ended. We're going to see how this goes. I feel a lot better. But I'm also not completely out of the woods. I can tell there's still some fluctuations, so I guess we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, we might revisit this in a future episode.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right then, guys.
All
cool.
right.
That is everything.
Yeah, thank you for watching and or listening. And yeah, you can go to the show notes to find all the details and all the stuff. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with our podcast, you can go to ikario.com/podcast to find all the relevant links where you can subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube or wherever you want to get the updates. And that is all.
That is literally all. All right, take care, guys. See you next week.